Today you're going to hear the story of the Prince and the Pauper. Once upon a time there was a good and kindly king. He ruled his country with fairness and generosity. But one day the king became very ill and could no longer watch over his kingdom. His son, the prince, stayed by his father's side, worrying and becoming sadder each day. The king was too sick to protect his people, so the greedy captain of the guards decided to rob them. Day after day, the captain and his guards went out to steal from the people, and they filled up the palace with mountains of food and gold. Nobody could save the kingdom from the thieving captain until one day 2 poor peasants, known as paupers, wandered near the palace looking for food. Mickey, one of the paupers, looked exactly like the prince. Of course, he didn't have fine clothes to wear or live in a fancy palace, but the poor boy did have 2 loyal friends. One was the other pauper, a silly fellow named Goofy, and the other was a friendly pup named Pluto. Mickey and Goofy watched as the captain and the guards sped by in royal coaches filled with food. Pluto was so hungry that he chased the coach into the palace. "Stop!" Mickey shouted. "Come back, Pluto!" And he ran off after his dog. But when Mickey got into the palace, he wasn't turned away. A guard waved at him and called him Your Majesty. After a while, Mickey became worried about being caught inside the palace. When he heard royal guards approaching, he looked for a way to hide. Meanwhile, the real prince was sitting through another boring lesson with Professor Horace. To pass the time, he looked out his pea shooter and aimed at his servant Donald. Then the prince thought, "I think I'll have some fun and hide from Professor Horace." A little later, there was a loud crash in the hallway. The prince and the pauper had each hidden in a suit of armor, and when they went tottering down the hallway, they crashed into each other. Lifting their helmet visors, the 2 stared and stared. They looked exactly alike. "Gosh, Your Royal Highness," said Mickey, "we could be twins." Mickey bowed low and introduced himself. "I was about to die of boredom until we bumped into each other," said the prince. "Do you know what it's like to be the prince?" "It must be fun," said Mickey. "Breakfast at 7, lessons until lunch, a banquet every night, more lessons. How I envy your freedom," said the prince. "You envy me?" said Mickey, amazed. "I sure do," said the prince. "You don't have to study. You can stay up late. Say, you've given me a wonderful idea. We'll switch clothes and switch places for a day. Nobody'll be able to tell the difference." And so it was done. As the prince, dressed as the pauper, headed out of the palace, he was pleased to make it past the royal guard, but he couldn't fool Mickey's dog Pluto. When Goofy saw the prince, he was sure it was Mickey and tried to talk to him, but the prince just said hello and walked on. Back at the palace, the pauper was dressed as the prince. Donald brought food to Mickey's room, but when Mickey reached for a turkey leg, Donald grabbed it first. "I'm checking for poison," Donald said, biting into a juicy drumstick. Pretty soon, Donald had eaten up all the food and poor Mickey didn't get one bite. Then it was time for the royal lessons. Mickey didn't do very well at bird hunting or horseback riding, and the prince wasn't doing any better. He got jostled by bustling crowds and felt lost in the city streets. Feeling hungry, he headed for the marketplace where he saw one of the captain's guards stealing food. He ordered the guard to stop, but the captain just glared at the raggedy peasant and called out, "Arrest this beggar. He's trying to steal from the royal guards." "Come on, my friend, quick, this way," called a voice. It was Goofy, who grabbed the prince and whisked him off to a small hut to hide. A few minutes later, the town crier came through the square with news that the king had died. "I must go to my palace tomorrow," the sad little prince said. "I will miss my father greatly, but now it is my duty to take over as king. I promised my sick father that I would rule the land justly and with compassion for all." "Gosh," said Goofy, "you're the prince? I thought you were my buddy Mickey." "I'm sure your friend I am your friend from now on, vowed the prince solemnly. Meanwhile, the captain of the guards figured out that Mickey was not the true prince. He seized Mickey and snarled, "Good day, my phony prince. Now that the king is out of the way, you're going to do what I say, or your little doggy Pluto will pay for it." That night the captain found the real prince at Goofy's house. He hauled the prince back to the castle and tossed him in the dungeon. "I see your royal ring," the captain said, "but it won't do you any good. As soon as the pauper is crowned king, I shall unmask him as an impostor and rule the kingdom myself." But the prince was not alone in the dungeon. Donald was there too. It was good to have a friend with him. Soon a strange-looking guard came to unlock the dungeon door. It was Goofy. He let the prince out just in time for the coronation. Meanwhile, Mickey, the pauper, was trying to avoid being crowned king. "Please don't put that crown on my head," Mickey begged. "He is not the prince," yelled the wicked captain. "He is an impostor. Seize him." "But I'm not an impostor," came a voice from the high balcony. It was the real prince. There was quite a scuffle, and Mickey, the prince, and their friends trapped the captain of the guards and his men. Finally, the prince was crowned king. His first act was to arrest the captain and his men. Then the kingdom was once again in kind, caring hands. Mickey the pauper was reunited with his friend Goofy and faithful dog Pluto, and he was made advisor to the king. The new king ruled with justice and compassion, and both he and Mickey remained friends and lived happily ever after.